The president will provide his State of the Union Tuesday, so why won't we call it that? I'm Jenna, and this is Smarter News. So while we may hear about President Trump's opinion on the State of the Union, we will not call the president's speech Tuesday a State of the Union, and I'll explain why in just a moment. We borrow the term State of the Union from the U.S. Constitution, and I'm going to read from it here. He, the president, shall from time to time give to the Congress information of the State of the Union and recommend to their consideration such measures as he shall judge necessary and expedient. So, translation, the president from time to time will share with Congress his reflections and priorities. Note, it did not say in person. It did not say in a speech. In fact, it was quite vague. This touch base has taken a few different forms, in fact. President George Washington provided an update in person. President John Adams did the same, but then President Thomas Jefferson decided to do something different. He gave his updates in writing, and that tradition continued for about 100 years until President Woodrow Wilson gave his State of the Union in person and got us back on track in that. And then we got technology involved. Radio in 1923, President Truman on television in 1947, and President Johnson on television in 1965 in prime time. And now that's the tradition we follow today. Why are we not referring to this speech as the State of the Union? Well, we don't use this term in the press, and most presidents don't as well, during their first year because they've been president for such a short period of time. Next year, we will call this the President's State of the Union, but right now it's an address to a joint session of Congress, meaning that both chambers, the House and the Senate, will be present along with the president's cabinet and the Supreme Court justices. It doesn't have quite the same ring to it, does it? An address to a joint session of Congress, but that's technically what it is. Lawmakers do get to invite a guest. That can be a spouse or a friend or even a supporter. And those are the people that sit in the upper seats of the chamber while lawmakers sit on the floor. By the way, there's no rule that lawmakers have to attend. Some, in fact, will choose not to. And reportedly, some Democrats are inviting federal workers laid off by President Trump's agenda as their guest. So we'll see what dynamics are in play on Tuesday night. We also have to watch for surprise guests, those who sit in the gallery as well, who may get a mention in the speech. That's been a tradition that goes back to the 1980s with President Reagan, and presidents tend to have these special guests who they mention or talk about in the speech to have a way to highlight a certain topic that they also want to talk about. It goes without saying that the focus will be on the President of the United States, but within the gallery are reminders about the limits of presidential power. For example, the Supreme Court justices sitting before President Trump may very well decide how much of the DOJ agenda can stay and what has to go. There are more than 100 legal cases filed due to the layoffs of federal workers, and we may very well see those cases wind up before the Supreme Court, who will have to define presidential authority. Lawmakers sitting in the chamber will also have to negotiate a budget deal by March 14th. So that's not this Friday, but something to watch for next Friday. And if they don't negotiate some sort of spending plan, some sort of budget, we could face a government shutdown. The president only has so much influence over this process. How will he address this topic, if at all? How will he even get involved in these negotiations? Those are some big questions we have going into the next 2 weeks. It's rare that we get to see the three equal branches of government together in one place at one time. So that's one of the other things that makes this event particularly interesting. And although the spotlight will remain on the president, it's a good reminder that our destiny as a nation is not solely dependent on one person. Some questions I have going into tonight's speech, and there are many, but here are a few that are just top of mind. Fresh on everybody's mind is the historic interaction in the Oval Office on Friday between President Trump and President Zelensky. Does President Trump choose to address this, or does he avoid talking about it? Tuesday also marks a deadline for new tariffs to go into effect. How much do we hear about this, or do some last-minute concessions sort of take it off the table? How partisan is this speech? Or do issues like egg prices and the cost of living get top billing over talking about the opposite party, or even the past? Every year, by the way, the opposing party to the president gets a chance to respond with prepared remarks. And Democrats have tapped Senator Alyssa Slotkin of Michigan to deliver the party's official response. She's a former CIA analyst who fought to turn a Republican House seat in Michigan blue. She was able to do that successfully. And Politico describes her as, quote, a lawmaker who ran a disciplined campaign last year focusing on economic issues and won a state where Trump also prevailed, end quote. She could be somebody to watch. Without a prominent party leader, Senator Slotkin and what she prepares could really give us some indication on where Democrats are going to choose to focus next. Here's what I'm curious about, though. What is the broader theme? And what does President Trump choose to prioritize? How much does he focus on the past versus the future? Does he even say the word Biden? I'm going to be watching for little things like that. And a question that I have to ask before any of these big speeches is, who does he decide is his audience? Is it the American people? Is it the global audience? Is it the lawmakers? Is it foreign leaders? There's going to be a lot of people watching on Tuesday night. So who does he specifically want to talk to and why? It's totally up to him. In this very rare situation, President Trump will have a huge platform and an open mic, no shouted questions from the press. And this is very rare. How does he approach it? We'll see when the speech happens just after 9 o'clock Eastern time. What do you want to hear from the president? I'd love to hear from you on that. What do you think is a top priority he needs to address? Let me know. Thank you for your support of Quick, Concise, Nonpartisan News. We'll be back tomorrow with a review of not the State of the Union, but the president's speech. What happened, why it matters, and what to watch for next. Have a great day.